We're just setting it up. So a few more seconds.
Sure. Like I was telling you, right? The next time onwards, I think, SaaS should also move to India. So many founders come to the US.
Awesome. So Rohit, we are live, and the audience is just, kind of streaming in. We'll wait for a minute or two for everyone to, kind of just join in and settle down. And then we
Absolutely.
can get into the, you know, the details and the nitty-gritties of the topic at hand today.
Sure.
And for those guys who've actually, tuned in on time, Rohit has explicitly mentioned that he wants to make this entire session lighthearted, which in many ways, kind of reflects his character, having known him for some time now. So, expect a lot of humor, expect a lot of light-hearted moments. You know, it's not all serious, it's not all GTM, it's not all, just about business. A lot of interesting facets from, Rohit's professional life will be discussed, uh, some of which I am privy to. So, yeah, and so expect a good light-hearted session for those guys who are tuning in from US. Expect a good end to your weekend, and for those guys who are basically tuning in from India, well, a good morning to all of you. And this will probably set the tone for what seems to be also an eventful week, given that there is Dussehra this week around.
Yeah, festive times, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So awesome, wonderful. So
Let's keep it a little, I know that you want to reveal as much as possible, but, let's keep a few things off topic because there are like, as far as incidents are concerned, there are so many incidents in my career. If I tell you all of those, you will not like me.
yeah. I mean, I think just to kind of complete the joke, basically in real life, I am the accelerator of your of your life because I am doing all the observability of the incidents that have taken place
Yes,
and
you
maybe
have.
documenting. But anyways,
Absolutely.
we are 2 minutes past time, so I think let's get started. I also want to honor everybody who's joined in on time. So guys, good evening to all those who are joining in from the US. Good morning to all those who are joining in from India, right? And my presumption is that most of the audience here is either based out of the US or based out of India, given the nature of the topic and the fact that most people here have tuned in to understand better on how to set up repeatable GTM motions, especially in large markets like US. Okay, with that I begin. Uh, for the unversed, I am Srinivasan Narayan. I am the co-founder and CEO of Good Meetings, which is an online video platform that helps sales guys sell 10x better on video. So we want to be the go-to platform for remote sales, build all the toolkits, all the tool sets that's required that helps sales guys sell remotely better. That's all that you will hear about Good Meetings on this discussion. So don't worry, it's not about Good Meetings at all. It's about another really interesting topic called Road to SaaS, right? What exactly is Road to SaaS? Let me just spend 1 minute talking about it because that will help set the context for the discussion. As an entrepreneur from India who tried to, still tries to build a global product out of India, my first port of call was the US. And like most entrepreneurs who've been born and brought up in India, I honestly had no idea on how to sell to the US markets, right? I made my first trip last year in November. Met a lot of people, right? I met a lot of people in the B2B SaaS domain. I met a lot of people who were thought leaders who had sold their companies, hailing from India, but kind of having built it in the US. Met a lot of investors, and that kind of opened my thought process, right? And I realized that the US market was massive, but selling into the US market required a different kind of thinking because the playbooks that typically worked in the US wouldn't work in India. And that whole thought process got reinforced when I came back to India because SaaS entrepreneurs in my network, whether they were small or big, really reached out to me saying, "What did you do there? How did you get your first customers?" And then I realized that this was a much more, deeper problem than I had thought. This was one problem that, I faced, but like me, there were many other B2B SaaS entrepreneurs in the same boat. And that's what, kind of incentivized all of us in my team to start this series where we call people who've probably, who are at least a few steps ahead of us in terms of setting up the reputable GTM motions in the US. We pick one topic and go really deep into that. So that's what Road to SaaS is all about. For those who've been with us since our first episode, this is our third episode. We've had two great people in Vinod from Cloud Cherry, and now Unifor, and Shri Krishnan from Rocket Lane joined us earlier, and now we have Rohit from Axel Data joining us. And today's topic is, how to sell to enterprises, large enterprises in the US. This is my third trip to the US. And unlike the cliche where I typically end up saying that I have known the founder for a long time, hand to heart, I have known Rohit only for the last 6 months. But I can also tell you that in those 6 months, Rohit has been so affable, so helpful, that I actually think that I have known Rohit for years now. So it goes a long way in talking about how helpful Rohit has been, not just to me, but also to other entrepreneurs in my network. So kudos to him. And having learned a lot from him in the last 6 to 8 months, I really felt that it would be appropriate for him to feature here, because I think his nuggets of wisdom uh, across his entire entrepreneurial career would really help all those people who are tuning in today to think better about the GTM motions at large, and how to sell to large enterprises in the US in particular, because that's something that Rohit and his company AccelData.io have kind of uh, trail based, so to say. So that's about Road to SaaS. That's about me. That's about our company. Let's put all of that aside and get started. Uh, for those who are not initiated, Rohit is a serial entrepreneur. He's worked for marquee firms like InMobi and 24/7 earlier. His previous company was acquired by 24/7, and today he is the founder and CEO of Axel Data, a data observability platform, which is funded by marquee investors like Lightspeed Venture Partners, and it is basically sells the product sells to large enterprises. But I'll stop at that. I'll actually, throw this question to Rohit and ask him to introduce himself a bit before we get into the details. Rohit, over to you. If you can tell a bit about yourself, your background, uh, then we can actually, kind of get started.
Sure, Srini. So thank you so much for all the kind words. I can tell everyone that half of those kind words are manufactured. They are not true. Okay. So the nuggets of wisdom that you guys were so desperately or, hopefully waiting to hear, I don't think I have as many as Srini has painted it to be. My career has been like a meandering of successes, failures, slow S turns, S bends. And finally, it seems that, we are at a place where there is some amount of lift off. But that lift off also comes along with a lot of gravity. As Srini said, I'm the founder and CEO right now at Axel Data. Axel Data is essentially a data observability platform. It's an evolving category, and we are market leaders in that evolving category. The company has been alive for about 4.5 years. We are about 200 people selling across to large enterprises in the US, in Europe, and in APAC. There are many things, many aspects of B2B selling that we will cover today. But I've always been an engineer, started my career about 18 years ago at IBM's India Software Labs as an intern. And I've enjoyed my career as an engineer as much as, as a product person, now as a CEO. The key to my success, or the way that I look at my career, is to have fun every stage, as opposed to waiting for a destination to arrive. So the topic or the podcast topic that Srini has selected is an amazing one, because it never talks about the destination to SaaS. It actually talks about the road to SaaS, and I think that is the key, that you have to continue to enjoy whatever it is that you're doing, and the road to SaaS is more enjoyable because nobody knows where the destination is. So very happy to be here, and Srini, looking forward to questions from all the viewers who are joining us today, and hopefully we'll be able to deep dive into some topics.
Amazing, Rohit. Uh, Rohit, you spoke a bit about yourself. Why don't we also start by understanding a bit about what Axel Data does and how you got this idea, and generally about your journey into the SaaS world?
Yeah, so the journey is, I think many companies and you get attached to certain groups of people as you go in your career. But I think from my perspective, the most influential group that I ever met has to be at InMobi. And this was about, I think, 15 years back now, in 2007, 2008 timeframe. I met with, the current CTO of InMobi, Mohit, and he was an amazing mentor and manager. I think that is where the startup bug hit me, or the startup, bug bit me, as they basically call it. And ever since, I've always been, working with a group of people where the mission becomes really important, as opposed to caring about which company or brand you work for. If you have the right band, then you can go and build whatever kind of, or create whatever kind of music you want to. I think if you look back 15 years, the company InMobi has stood the test of time, gone through its own ups and downs. And, that's a great brand to be. And that was an amazing time, because 2008 InMobi, or 2007 InMobi came into being. 2008 or 2009, Flipkart came into being. 2010, Snapdeal came into being, and many other companies followed. Maybe Snapdeal was 2009 as well. I think I think we had the good fortune of getting these opportunities to work in startups, as opposed to, some of our seniors, or even the previous generation, which could be as much as, let's say, 5 to 7 years senior to us. They did not have these opportunities. They were working either in GSIs, or they were working in MNCs. But, by the time that we were ready to take on larger engineering challenges, startups had come into being. So I was, therefore brought up in an environment where there was no cloud, but there was plenty of open source, and there was like a lot of inherent talent and energy available. So we were able to apply all of those things to sort of really scale out engineering from India for the first time. I think InMobi was one of the first companies which hit scale. And by scale, I actually mean, web scale. The year that we raised, I think, $200 million was 2011 in September, or maybe August, one of those months. And I think at that point in time, if you added Facebook and Twitter's cumulative funding, I don't think they had $200 million. And so we were actually scaling the company at a rate that was very, very different. And in 2010, I think data started showing up. We had lots and lots of challenges with managing data. Although I would basically say that the amount of data that we were managing in 2010 is probably about 1/3, 1/4, maybe even 1/6 of what I traditionally see in firms today. And it can be argued that data is growing exponentially every year, and all of that we'll come to. But I think that is where the genesis of the idea is, that I spent a lot of time debugging applications myself. We built an ad platform, and that ad platform had tons and tons of problems all the time, because we were growing at such scale. So the exponential growth that I see in data was happening to InMobi. And, a lot of my operational understanding of how code should perform when it is live, when you're running a 24/7 business, that evolved, that thinking, that fundamental genesis of the idea was there. Fast forward about 5-6 years, I started working at this company called Hortonworks. Hortonworks used to provide a data platform using which companies were supposed to build their data and analytics platforms, machine learning and AI applications on top. It was a very interesting concept, because the whole data platform until then was either Postgres on a relational database, or Oracle, which was a completely commercial offering. But something like a Hortonworks data platform had the potential to change the world entirely, because you had the entire platform as open source, and developers, people like you and me, could basically use the platform to build really, really mission critical applications. In 2016, I think, was the time where data and analytics became mainstream, because the number of applications that I saw getting operational, where data was activated, people or businesses were relying on that data, started happening in 2016, 2017 timeframe. And that's where we started getting a lot of calls which said that, hey, listen, my platform is available, but applications are not working. Something is performing, something is not performing. And the continuous challenge of building and operating reliable data products started to emerge as a theme. So I started deep diving into that topic sometime in 2016, 2017. And I kept, looking at the problem from different angles, that, why can't an App Dynamics or a previous generation APM platform, why can't that solve this problem? And, the more I kept thinking about it, the more it was very, very apparent and clear that this is going to be an extremely large market, because everybody wants to do more with data and analytics. Everybody wants to do more with, they want to basically activate their data, put mission critical systems in production, but they don't really have the talent. And so the mathematical opportunity was for me that the exponential growth of data, the exponential growth of systems, which were very complicated, because the supply chain of data is much more complex than the physical supply chain. And finally, the availability of talent, which was actually a flat graph at best, growing at 15% year over year. So if you just look at it from an engineer who just had basic understanding of quant, every year you would see that the opportunity size is getting bigger and bigger for automation platforms and systemic improvements in how you should monitor the platform to ensure that business and data are reliable. So that's sort of the genesis. We took about a year to identify the core team, look at whether we had enough passion in ourselves to keep coming about and coming back at the idea. Because as you also know, many teams come together, they discuss ideas over a weekend, and then it is also forgotten over a bar counter or a drink party. But we actually kept at it. A year from there, we felt the same level of motivation. We felt that the problem was expanding, the stage was growing. Well, it was the right time. So 2018 June we came out, and the rest, it's not history yet, but it is history in the making. We will make something.
Awesome. That's very inspiring, Rohit. My next question, Rohit, is we do understand what a accelerator does at a broad level now. I wanted to understand from you, once you had this idea, given that you also have experience of being an entrepreneur earlier and having worked for global companies like InMobi, how did you get your first customers? Were your first customers directly enterprise customers in the US, or you started from India, refined the product, and then realized that there was a much bigger massive opportunity lurking around in the US, and you decided to then move to the US and stuff? Can you talk a little bit about how you identified your ideal customer profile and the demographics and the country to chase?
Yeah, that is, I think, I can answer that much better in the reverse order, looking back as opposed to, when I was looking forward. But one thing that now has become very clear to us about 4 years into the journey, 4+ years, is something very simple that, you are going to be, accelerator is applicable a lot more to large, complex enterprise environments as opposed to SMB and the startup environments. And, our first customer was GE, and the first check size for us was over $200,000. And this was just about 4 months out of stealth mode. We started the company in earnest on 1st of August 2018, and I think we acquired GE as a customer about 4 months later. Paperwork took another 2-3 months, but it was a phenomenal achievement. And I think what ended up happening because of that one event is that we also generated a lot of conviction in our ability to sell to the enterprise, but also our applicability to sell to enterprises, or the need of the product within the enterprise itself. Many of these signals, therefore, were sort of together in the sense that you built a product which was targeted to the enterprise, and the enterprise liked it and they paid for it. Because many of the times, what ends up happening is that you're building for a segment, but you don't really know that there is a need. Now, it goes without saying that we were coming from the background, so it wasn't as though we were coming out completely blank into the market. So we always knew that we were going to sell into the top end of the enterprise, especially Fortune 500 and global. But it still is sort of not very clear on the day that you started, right? I mean, you still have to figure out whether it is applicable, does it deal with the complexities that the enterprises care about, and the way that I sort of contextualize that for myself and continue to do so is that if you're going into a complex environment, if you're going into a mature environment, which typically enterprises are, then you also need a mature offering. So you cannot take a toy to, let's say, a real gunfight. You need guns for a gunfight. Otherwise, you won't win. And over a period of time, what we realized is that the only one distillation factor of all of this is the complexity and the applicability of your IP. How deep is your product? Is your product deep enough to solve complex enterprise level problems? If it is, then you have a good chance of, setting victory. I wouldn't say that we were absolutely 100% deliberate, but there were like a couple of other examples where we felt that we sold into the top end of the SMB or sold into like the low end or the top end of even startups in a couple of places. But we found that, we didn't have as much applicability as, some of the other enterprise customers who were pinging us. So with that in mind, it became easy to, design the full GT and think about who should be our sales leader, where should we see.
So Rohit, I just wanted to understand, how did you get your first customer in GE, right? Was it serendipity? Was it, just your network or your, founding team's network? Was it GE US? Was it through GE India, right?
Yeah.
And then, once you got the first customer, how did you get your next 4-5 customers? And I presume they were in the US. And how do you decide that, okay, now we should just start selling into the US?
So all of these are like funny stories, right? So the first customer who we got was essentially G, like I mentioned. How did we get them? We essentially knew about the problems that they had. How did we know about the problems? It was basically through a person or an architect who had just arrived at one of the companies that I used to work for, Hortonworks. He had just arrived. And then I knew another founder in the US who was at that point in time running a very, very powerful BI slash data warehousing solution called Sparkline. And Sparkline was eventually acquired by Oracle. And so I knew that founder, and he would tell me that these performance issues continue to exist in certain environments, and therefore, more observability will help, it will enhance the capabilities of that platform. Now, how did we get there? Is a funny story. I called the person who came to Hortonworks and I said, do you think they have the same problem? And then I just triangulated. I called everybody and I tried to find out whether they have a real problem or not. And we also found out that the CDO at G, he was going to travel to India. And I made sure that I somehow found time of 30 minutes on his calendar, which was not very straightforward, but we still managed to get that. And like 30 minutes, we ensured that we had the next 90 minutes allocated. And after the 90 minutes that we spent again, we had the deal with us. The problem was very acute. So I think sometimes you also have to, I think the best way that this was put to me was basically about just breathe, that, keep polishing your wings. You can get the best product and then wait for the winds to come and then you'll fly. So I think it is exactly the same case for us. Even in the case of G, I think their problem was much more acute than the width or the volume of the solution that we were providing, but it was solving one of those things really well. We acquired a second customer immediately thereafter. I think 2 months later, we met with the founders at PhonePe, and they knew that they were going to expand pretty rapidly from a data point of view. And credit to them because they were also looking forward. And when they were looking forward as to what we should be doing, that became very, very interesting for us. That okay, how about selling it to them? So that I think what ended up happening with us was that we would we met them and we knew that they were basically going to go on a very different path. They were charting a very, very ambitious course. And therefore, for them, they knew the value or the importance of data. And so we got the second customer. After that, we hit drought. For 6 months, we didn't sell anything. So I think the second contract was January or February. And for us, the next 6 months were extremely tiring because we didn't have a lead generation mechanism. We didn't know who to sell it to. Occasionally people would basically come and say, okay, but we have already solved these problems. I don't think these problems exist. And the mistake that I think I was personally making was that I was actually going and talking to the lowest level of the people over there, which is essentially I was going and talking to engineers. I was talking to, people who were not even directors of the data platforms. So the decision making was always delayed. The decision making was delayed. The right insights were not available to us. The third customer who we acquired was essentially in Thailand. All of a sudden we get a call from a telco leader, a data analytics telco leader, and she says that, our systems are not working. We immediately need you to send somebody. And, it was a very interesting discussion. We actually put one of our, the current head of all customer engineering onto a flight. And we said, okay, why don't you go and land over there? And we'll make sure that, these 2 additional features that you need, you will get that. But there was like a very common thread. The common thread was the learnings for me were as follows: 1, 2, and 3. 1, geography didn't matter. 2, data volume mattered. 3, mission criticality mattered. So if you were in the path of revenue, if you were in a mission critical system, then you're obviously going to do that. And from there on, it became much more repeatable ever since.
Got it. What I also learned from you is, one, keep hustling, because I think that 30-minute meeting that you set up with the chief data officer, I'm sure that didn't come easy, right? The second thing is, always keep your eyes and ears open. You don't know from where any opportunity might actually, come by. So makes complete sense.
See, hustle is also jugaad, and jugaad, according to me, is growth mindset. If you have the growth mindset, you will do it. There is no other way. I don't think, a lot of people think that they will build the best products and customers will come. Nobody comes, my dear friend. You can open the shop and swat flies, nobody will come. So the point is that, where do you really want to go? I mean, if you think that customers will come just because, you're building something, this is actually, the root of how this hustle was injected in my head is also many years back. When in 2012, after I finished in Mobi, I was building the precursor to what is current day Swiggy. And one of my friends, who I asked for help, he said, Rohit, you've got to give up your corporate culture and corporate thinking because, restaurant businesses, and if you want to really build what Swiggy wasn't even in existence. But his point was that if you really want to run in this, thin, wafer thin, revenue constrained industry, then you've got to give up your blue chip 5-star behavior and come onto the street and start working with people. And I think the previous startup experience has actually helped in this startup as well. That there's no ego, there's no shame. Shamelessly, you just block people's calendar and then say, okay, let's see what happens. Whether you have time or you don't. The one thing you can't create is a problem for the customer, but you definitely can present what solutions you have so that if they have the problem at some point in time, there'll be some recall.
Oh, absolutely. And I echo those thoughts. Uh, and just to let the audience here know, in fact, the way I actually interacted first with Rohit was through a cold email. And for all those people who think that that kind of hustle is not scalable, it's not remarkable, I can tell you that I've met some of the best guys who are helping me out, or some of the best guys who gave me some amazing, knowledge about GTM uh, through a cold email, right? So completely agree that, I mean, hustle is something that actually, differentiates uh, a normal person from a guy who's hungry to achieve success. So absolutely bang on that, Rohit.
There is actually no other option. No matter how many times you think that you will be able to get something done without some level of hustle, I think it is. It is. I don't think it is. It is. It's misplaced according to me. I think the reason that you and I are in connect right now is because you wrote an email and that email was good and everybody wants to help. At the end of the day, we are all crooked and broken beings, right? And everybody needs to feel good about themselves. And in order to feel good about yourself, you want to help someone.
Absolutely.
So what is wrong with that?
Absolutely. And it actually, trickles down. I mean, the same applies to me also. There are people who reach out to me, and if I feel that the email is genuine and the help required is genuine, then definitely, I also tend to respond. So one thing I've learned though is, canned emails without any personalization never works. So that's something I've learned the hard way. So I'm just letting everybody know on that piece also. Great, Rohit. I think, and guys, please, keep your questions coming in. So, we'll keep asking them as we, progress in the discussion. Rohit, this is great. So we understand what Axel Data does. We understand how you got the idea. We also understand how you got your first few customers, right? And you generally understood that, this would work really well in big enterprises rather than SMBs or mid-market, right? Now I want to, kind of get into the next phase where, once you've got your 3, 4, 5 users and you're more learned about the market, you are more learned about the opportunity, you're sharper about whom to target. How did you define your market? And therefore, the larger question is, how does one define an enterprise market, right? And how is it different from a mid-market or an SMB opportunity?
Yeah, so that's a really important question, right? So the way that we sort of went about defining the whole thing was whiteboarding is still the most powerful weapon that you have. And we essentially looked at, what kind of enterprises have volumes of data. And those came out to be in like 3 or 4 different segments, right? Digital upstarts, telcos, banks and card companies where there's like lots of transactions. And then we looked at, the first 5, 6 customers and we looked at, okay, what is the real pattern? Is the pattern that there are enough number of data applications or data products being built on the data platform itself and how mission critical they are and who's feeling the pain the most? And is their OEM willing to support them? Whether they have, a particular product or are they getting all the right answers from that OEM, or do they need additional layer of observability or monitoring? And my thesis was very simple. When App Dynamics was built, it could always be argued that, hey, Microsoft is going to build the best monitoring platform, or App Dynamics was built, and, okay, why didn't Sun build it? So those questions would oftentimes come to us, and we would basically look at, certain customer accounts. They would say, oh, listen, I have a team of great engineers, and, they're going to build all of this. The mistake that I was also doing at the beginning was that I was going into very developer-centric or developer-heavy companies. Now, please remember this, that not all companies which are on, on one mile of the 101, they're not necessarily all your targets. There's like a much wider universe of companies which don't have the ability to attract engineers like Google, like LinkedIn, like PayPal, but they have equally bigger problems. And therefore, you have to be very, very specific and targeted about who you are going to. Because as a founder, what you can't deal with is essentially a build versus buy debate. Because here's my theory, that given infinite time and space and resources, everybody can come up with the same solutions, right? Because you'll get the talent, you'll apply the brain power, and eventually you'll end up at the same solutions. But do you want to fight that fight, right away, or can you wait for that fight to appear in your patch? And my job was to make sure that we were going to customers who were much more amenable to buying a product as opposed to building it themselves. If they were building, or they had said that I have a team of 25 engineers who are dedicated to improving the following 5 KPIs in terms of operations, I would just run away. Right. So I would actually not go there. In terms of complexity, which was my second vector, that, what is the complexity? And if the complexity was that, you had 3 or 4 different kinds of things. For example, if you were to think of just a CRM system or a sales system, in a CRM system, you have your SaaS, or, you have your CRM, it brings in data. You also want to integrate Marketo. All of that then becomes complex. Similarly, in data, you have ingestion system, you have machine learning, you have, dashboarding, you have the platform itself. When somebody had 3 or 4 of these, we would just go and work with them, because it made sense for us to go and say, hey, listen, your environment is complex enough and you will derive value by a single pane of glass. So what ended up happening out of that was then the designations surfaced, which is either an SVP of data platform, or director of data engineering, or a chief data officer, or a CTO. Then it becomes easy. Now, I'm not going to say that all this happened in 6 months' time, right? It took us like our own sweet time, about 15 to 18 months to figure out all of these. But there was like a clear flow chart. Unhappy with your data platform, too many issues, costs out of hand, not enough resources, and certain level of complexity. Then, it was like amazing.
So Rohit, effectively, you're saying there are 2 vectors on which you decided your customer. One was basically whether they wanted to build it themselves versus wanting to buy the product. And the second was the level of complexity in the organization. The more number of softwares they used, the complexity obviously increased, and therefore they needed a third party to help them solve this problem.
Absolutely. I mean, there are always, like I said, that if a company believes that this is going to be, your offering is a core part of their IP, and they want to build it and own it long term, I think that's a very difficult proposition to displace. And I think people need to understand that everybody who's trying to build a SaaS company, especially in the B2B space, the more the core, the IP, I think harder it becomes to sell into that. But if it is something which is complementary, but it is not strategic, but extremely valuable. So there's like a value to strategy metric. So if it is high on value, high on strategy, the company will build it. But if it is low on strategy, high on value, the company will buy. If it is low on strategy and low on value, companies won't buy. So it's a simple 2x2 matrix.
Or maybe we'll share that with our audience after the call so that they are able to visualize this better. Couple of things here, Rohit. In fact, I want to take a step back because there's a question that has come from, Arijit Lahiri, and he asks, you didn't mention how the company in Thailand got to know you, right? You did get a call. So I think people are curious to know how the third client, came in. How did they get to know about you? So a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. So this is, the month is, like I said, September 2019, and we are about a year old at that point in time. So what I had started to do was, I did not have enough confidence to set up a full-fledged GTM team myself. But what I would do very early was that I would basically go and experiment these small experiments. So what I did was, I essentially contracted with 2 or 3 GTM teams, And these GTM teams, I found them through either friends or family or network, or sometimes even from investor introductions. So Lightspeed, for example, had introduced us to a selling team in India, a pretty effective one, a very good team. And similarly, I had my own connections from the past, and I found a team which was in APAC. So they would basically scout for customers who would require similar things for us. And they generated this lead, but this lead was like a real hot one. It was a live one. So it came through, one of these sales agencies. And the way that we work, from a commercial point of view, was that we work flat on outcome and nothing on fixed costs. Because, until then, we had just raised $2 million, and I didn't want to blow up all the money on just very expensive sales teams working across the globe. Of course, you make certain mistakes and you invest or invest. In some cases, you retract. But one advice I would always give to everyone is that have a good balance between what money you pay month on month and what you pay on outcome to some of these external teams.
Variable cost versus fixed cost mindset and balancing both of them out.
So the balance is very simple, right? I mean, if you're starting out of India and if you've raised a small round as opposed to a very large round, then cash is always of the essence, and this is something I tell everyone that, us founders, we took like a hit where we went down to about 10, 15, 20% of our corporate earnings. And our goal and objective was very simple. Our goal was to get the product to a place where it would start selling so that we don't have to worry about, what is going to happen to the company. And instead of paying us, we would then pay the next employee and the next employee and the next employee. So I think, that sort of has to be like your own internal dynamic. Look, there are all kinds of entrepreneurs. I was much more comfortable and still am in making sure that the money that we are spending generates a lot more value than just blowing the money. You can blow all kinds of money. Right? There's no doubt that you can spend all the money that you have in the bank, and very successfully so. But as you can see, especially in these market conditions which are ahead of us, I think financial prudence is always going to be valuable. GTM experiments are also very expensive, unlike, let's say, engineering and product experiments. And therefore, one has to keep a tab on what is the real tolerance for a business to afford a full-fledged GTM team from a fixed cost point of view. And if you think that it is still early, then I would highly recommend that founders go out and sell, hustle, do jugaad, whatever it is. But don't just get into the rush of hiring a GTM team, because GTM teams are very expensive to build.
That's an excellent advice, because this is something that multiple successful founders have also told me, that the first few customers have to be gotten into the system by the founder. Founder-led sales is very, very underestimated and underrated, because it helps at two levels. One is obviously the founder, and therefore the team gets to understand what is selling, at what price point, and why something is selling. So then you have a better grip of the market. And then you can probably hire a team and you can guide them through it. Otherwise, you're effectively outsourcing your GTM, and that's never ever a advisable thing to do, right?
Absolutely, it is not. I think the key message from this whole discussion is as follows. Look, there is nobody who's going to have as much conviction in your own product and offering as opposed, the founding team has to be comfortable in going out and presenting itself. It's almost like an author saying that, I'm going to write a book, and in this book, I'm going to write about these topics, and I'm willing to take the criticism and the adulation that comes along with it. And so therefore, founders have to be on the road and finding customers and selling it all the time.
Absolutely.
There is no other way out. I think if you go back to what Girish was saying a few years back, and continues to say the same message even today, that your first customer is not your friend. Your first customer is not somebody who you got introduced to. Your first customer is somebody who actually looks up for a problem, identifies you as a potential vendor, and buys you. Now, admittedly, this is not the case in enterprise selling. This definitely is the case in sort of SMB and mid market. But at the same time, the enterprise awareness of your offering is going to come through the same channel that Girish refers to. That somebody has to look up for you.
Got it. A follow-up question there, Rohit, while you are able to, kind of classify your ideal customer profile basis the complexity at work and the amount of data that is being churned out, right? And the fact that given that this is the amount of data, many companies don't want to, kind of build a solution that you're building in-house. Can we abstract this out and help other founders who are listening in? Or how do you exactly define an enterprise client, right? What are the key traits of an enterprise client? and how are those trades different from a mid-market or a SMB client, right? Because then founders will be able to, kind of empathize with, the kind of selling that gets associated with those kind of customers.
Yeah. So, I wish I had this understanding and information starting the company. Uh, since I came from an engineering background, I would not actually place so much emphasis on research. But one of the things I would highly recommend is, just do a lot of research. Buy a tool like Zoom Info for like a few months or something, or do your own set of research. You could also look at just the Fortune 500 list or the Global 2000 list and see whether what you're trying to sell is going to make sense to those companies who exist in those lists, right? What are their strategic initiatives? What are the things that they are doing? If they're public companies, what is the revenue? For us, it basically starts at revenue plus the number of employees, geographies in which they are present, which industry are they, sort of servicing. We basically make a matrix of these four, and then the rest of it is pretty standard from a research point of view as to, what has been the revenue growth. Therefore, you make certain assumptions as a proxy of their growth. You can also proxy the factor of growth by which their data is increasing year over year, and you start working with that. But I would highly recommend looking at revenue, employees, geographies, and kind of problems. I think that gives a good idea whether they will be a potential fit or a sale or not. Now, it also depends. For example, let's take Good Meetings, right? Good Meetings is essentially helping people to do B2B sales. If Good Meetings has to be sold, then it has to be sold into a community of sellers. So the question is, how many sellers does a company really have to benefit from a solution like Good Meetings? Because if Good Meetings has to benefit by selling into one person at a time, then if you find hundreds of them at the same place, then it's easier for you to increase your revenue. So I think if you can also align it with the vector of your own unit economics or growth, then it's much, much easier for you to say, okay, I'm going to go and sell 15 copies of this so that, I make more money. So
Makes
I think
sense.
that combination generally works.
Got it. With another thing I wanted to check with you was you get your initial customers, right? Now you're able to refine your ICP.
Mhm.
Now, how do you then set up a reputable GTM motion? So now we are fast forwarding to maybe, today, where, maybe you have more customers, right? And then, you have more structure in place with regards to your GTM. So how did you actually put that structure out, and what is the kind of, GTM motions that typically help selling into the enterprise?
So there are two things, right? One is when you talk about predictability or something, that's like a joke. It is a joke because nobody knows. It is so tough. But
Tough.
if you take the, and I've spoken with founders who are like several steps ahead of us, getting closer to 100 million, over 100 million. And everybody just tells me that, repeatability is the hardest thing to find in B2B SaaS. And I think that is where the key game is being played, which is that, what is really going on and how do you structure your team. But like I said, if I go back to what happened in 2019, we actually finished with about $1 million in ARR, and then we, set foot on US, saying that okay, let's completely focus our attention to the US, because we felt that the product was ready. We almost had an iPhone in our hand from a product perspective, and therefore it will sell in the US. And we had the ability to deal with pretty complex enterprise stack, etc. So now we are essentially at that point in time, raising our Series A. We've completed the raise. I think we did it in the middle of the pandemic. And then the question was that, okay, how are we going to increase sales and how are we going to structure this? And like I mentioned, I already had the exposure and experience of working with extremely seasoned sales campaigners. So I had a good sense of, how these salespeople think about what do they need and how will they succeed. So as soon as we closed our Series A, we started on the lookout of our VP of Global Sales. And I was very clear that the person has to come from a data background. They have to understand enterprise personas really well, and they should be comfortable in asking for a lot of money, because US-based GTMs also will cost you a lot of money. And therefore, consequently, what was incumbent on the founding team and the engineering team was to deliver value. And so we were ready from those perspectives. But what I did was that, and it also depends upon, management styles. A lot of founders I've seen, they're very comfortable in hiring the first sales rep or the second sales rep, and then eventually they get to the leader. But I went reverse. As soon as I felt that, we had the money in the bank to sort of start selling, I just decided that, it was the right time for me to go and hire the best sales leader who can start working with us. So I took the anchor first approach. A lot of people do the bottoms up approach that, I'm going to teach this sales rep and that guy is going to teach another two, and then we'll eventually find the leader. But I went and found the leader, from the space with a lot of experience of dealing with enterprise customers and the ability to, hire his own team, do sales operations, understand lead status, etc.
So there's a question that's coming from, Neelam Chand Jain, and he asks, is there some kind of specific sales enablement that helps companies win the enterprise?
Absolutely. I think you have to be very clear. If there is like one message that I want to give out to everybody who's listening and everybody who's thinking of building a company, I think it's called simplicity. You have to keep it simple. You cannot use complex words. You are out there to solve complexity. You're out there. Your product's job is to eliminate the complexity that the enterprise is facing, ensuring that their mission critical applications or whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish is possible. Don't expect that your sellers will have the same level of comfort with the technology. A lot of us come from engineering backgrounds. We're very comfortable with technology, but that tech influence has to be given up. Not to say that tech and IP is not valuable, but just to make sure that your GTM team is able to convey the same message effectively and with as much comfort as you would ideally like them to. So I think the training has to be very simple. The training has to be across stages of the funnel, that this is the kind of ideal customer profile or persona for you, and therefore this is what qualifies into a qualified opportunity. This is what you do at SAL1, SAL2, SAL3, whatever is your pipeline process. Some companies adopt a 5-stage process, some companies adopt a 6-stage process. Contracting is also a special stage process. But I think the most important thing is product training them on the lingo. If you're in the networking domain, teach them about networking. If you're basically in the B2B selling domain, then teach them about B2B revenue challenges. If you're in the data domain, then you have to be comfortable about speaking about data challenges and what people are dealing with. You have to speak the same language. And by the way, here's the other thing. Don't get frustrated if 1 or 2 training sessions don't work out. Do it again and do it again and do it again. And every year you'll find out that you'll have to be on a mission to simplify things. At this point in time, I can tell you that this year, which is 2022, second half after 4 years of being in existence, my KPI is to basically simplify the entire GTM offering in 8 postcards. I've given myself the target that all this complex offering, whatever we talk about observability and all of that, it should be available in 8 simple postcards which people can read out and say, yes, we do this or we don't do that. It has to be that simple. Simplicity is the key.
Got it. Also, he asks, after the RFP process is over, and this is typical to an enterprise as opposed to a SMB or mid-market, what is the difference that helps you win from other contenders after the RFP?
Yeah, so that is an interesting question. Not all enterprise contracts go through RFPs, just to let you know. RFPs are very common in India, but not all enterprises buy in RFPs. In some cases, you might also qualify for something called discretionary budget. And so you will, qualify for discretionary this year, and then next year you will become non-discretionary. So it depends upon, how you think about your product and how mission critical it is. From an RFP point of view, right? I mean, this is like a real killer. And this is yet another root of one more problem, right? Which is, do you create a category or do you compete in an existing category, right? Because if you're filling up an RFP, what it essentially means that the market is defined, the need already exists, the pain has been felt, and somebody has been looking at evaluating other vendors as well. If that is the situation, then your product has to be matured further up. But if you're actually creating a category in which, which was to an extent our case, where a group of 7-8 companies got funded in and around the same time. In our case, we are still in a lot of education mode. So in an RFP, you have to be able to differentiate yourself. And this used to happen a lot. When I was at 247, there would be Pega systems, there would be 247, and there would be like a few others. And then it was basically a feature war. So it actually depends whether you can add IP sets to your product or differentiated, let's say CSAT, NPS numbers, convenience features or something which can tilt the whole thing in your favor. But the bread butter has to still be there. or the meat and potatoes, as they call it, of dal and chawal. That has to be there. If it's not there, you can't compete. But the additional factors will come in place. But the good news is that not everything is going through RFI or RFPs.
Interesting. And how is the team structure? How does your sales or GTM squad look like to win an enterprise market? Is the team structuring very different from mid-market, or when you target mid-market or when you target SMBs?
Yeah, so that is another interesting question, right? So there are two different phases, right? Pre-sales and post-sales in let's say any large enterprise selling, because there is basically a whole pre-sales process which requires you to prove the value out. And then there's a whole post-sales sequence which you should do as a company so that you can make more money the following year. And if you think of it, the pre-sales position is very simple, that you have the account executive, you have the sales engineer, and you have the customer engineer who comes together. They think about whether the opportunity is qualified, and if the opportunity is qualified, what solution will fit the bill. And then once the post-sales process comes in, then the customer engineering has to continue to work with CSMs and support to make sure that you're successful, your objectives were met, so that next year you are sort of even more motivated to buy more from the company. So these two phases are separate. We are still learning about what works best. But one of the things that will definitely work for Indian startups, especially Indian SaaS companies, is because you can build a very, very strong success team, continue to invest in that, have the best of engineers in your success and support teams who get extremely satisfied, who can satisfy customers like anything. They can ask and answer technical questions, and they're extremely satisfied. I think that works. From our point of view, from an enterprise point of view, it is again, problems are very different. The same product can be applied in a governance scenario. The same product can be applied in a quality or a reliability initiative, and the same product can be applied in a performance scenario. So some level of, thinking on the feet is required. If you have like a very, very theoretical or a pedantic approach to selling, then it becomes a little difficult in the early stages. Over a period of time, the goal has to be that it becomes pedantic and everybody knows exactly what to say. This is the kind of customer. Probably the research quality also gets better, the leads get better, the qualification process from a marketing standpoint gets better. But all of this is like a learning phase. What can you do?
Since you spoke about pre-sales and post-sales, the next question is on that. So how important are pre-sales and solutioning engineers when selling to enterprises? When do you set up these capabilities in your organization? And what have you learned from your experience of having set up this kind of, if at all you set it up?
So if your offering is technical, if your offering requires implementation support, you will do yourself a huge favor by hiring them on day zero. See, because the solution engineers and the customer engineers and the sales engineers, right, any flavor which you take, they also see a lot of customer environment. So they then become proxies of you, or proxies of customers who are helping you improve the product, and that too massively. So if you can get them on your side early enough, then you will definitely accelerate the product. So like I was mentioning earlier, right, the person who, our first hire, actually our second hire, the first hire was basically a machine learning engineer. And the second hire was, this person who led, customer success, solution engineering, and solution delivery for the longest of time. I think the amount of influence and, the amount of benefits that we got from him, those were amazing, because initially the product lacks certain features, but do you have somebody who can actually understand, simplify, take an alternate route, and still satisfy the customer? And I think that becomes really important. So I would highly recommend, hiring them as soon as possible in the process. Of course, goes without saying. I remember that, Ashwin, our CTO, was in Germany, and I was actually sitting in GE. I was installing the product by myself. Ashwin was giving instructions from the other side, and I was executing those commands. So those experiences you can't take away. I mean, the founding team has to roll their sleeves up and they have to start work. But I think when you're at 5, 6, 7 customers, you should definitely hire.
Got it. Well, this is very interesting. I think the next question is, from De-Risk 360. He just wants to double down and understand, how do you evaluate or ascertain the complexity of the enterprise? Because I think one vector that you spoke about was the level of complexity in the organization that helps you decide whether this is a particularly interesting client for you or not. So delving deeper into that, how do you ascertain the complexity?
So, one is to definitely have direct conversations, right, from the buyer persona, but also talking to their employees, looking at, what are they sharing on LinkedIn, for example, trying to understand, what if there are press releases, if there are things that they have been public about. Identifying those trends and patterns are not very hard. I don't think you'll have a complete exposure of every single one of their problems, but you'll generally get a sense of where they are in their journey. And I'll give you a very specific example as opposed to keeping it very abstract. The specific example I have is I would basically look at all the people who were managing data platforms on my LinkedIn profile. I had a sales navigator account. I would look at who are the CDOs or CTOs and what are they doing on a day-to-day basis. What are the messages that they're looking for? What are the Apache projects that they are liking? And that would give me a good sense of where their head is at. Are they migrating to the cloud? Are they concerned about costs? Are they concerned about performance? What kind of positions are they hiring for? So looking at even job posting boards, that actually gives you a lot of idea of where the company is. For example, if I looked at somebody who had 10 positions for, let's say, Java developers, it essentially meant that they're developing a lot of applications. If they posted that we need administrators for a data platform, and the number of, let's say, administrators that they were looking for like was 5, 6, 7, 10, then I knew that there was something going on with the data platform. So in your case, it can be very simple as that okay, what is your offering? And for that offering, is there an open position? And if there is an open position, then you have an opportunity. As simple as that.
The next question is around compliances. And Anuj asks, how important are compliances like SOC 2, etc.? And how important are they for a company like Axel Data to be ready to sell to enterprise? Is it like absolutely mandatory, or it varies from case to case basis? How do you decide? Because it takes a lot of time and effort to get these things right.
Sooner you start investing, the better it is. When we were selling into one of the largest companies in the world, publicly we can speak about them, Oracle. I mean, it took us time. It took us 3 months to just go through the security check. So the sooner you start those initiatives, the better it is. It also puts a little bit of discipline right from the hiring process to how you maintain employee records and everything else. So there's like a lot of good things associated with going through one of these compliance processes. And it also, I think, more importantly, it sets the tone of how your company will be. So if you're early stage and if you start investing in some of these practices, right, then mentally everybody knows whether we are playing cricket or soccer. And the more prepared you are in the early stages, the easier it becomes, because then nobody is confused that, oh, I thought we were playing cricket, but we are playing soccer. No, all of us are playing cricket. Let there be no confusion that we are selling into the enterprise or the SMB or startups. Startups and SMBs also, they have a little bit of tolerance, but not too much. And they will also come up with the same set of requirements because they are being in turn asked by their customers to be SOC compliant or ISO compliant or whatever is their standard. I highly recommend, early investment in these areas.
Not running out of questions, so I'm just taking your permission to kind of stretch this discussion. The next question basically comes from Ajay. He says, should selling to enterprise be priority only after achieving traction with SMB and mid market in order to not lose momentum in long deals with lots of customizations, which can derail the product roadmap and also be a drain on the resources?
Yeah, that's a consistent debate. It depends. I think the real factor over there is at what speed are you generating your IP, number one. If the speed of generation of your IP is exceeding the rate at which customizations are required, then I think you can win with enterprise first strategy. The second factor over there is that what kind of customizations are being asked. Are those customizations going to be naturally fitting your roadmap in 12 months? If they are, then consider these enterprise companies as design partners and just build with them. We did that. We've done that consistently. We continue to do that. In certain areas of new IP where we want to develop, we don't do it without getting the blessing of, let's say, a couple of customers, and we actually include them into something called the early access program, and we work with them. We really enjoy that program because the use cases after that, they don't have to be found. They're very, very well crystallized and defined, which we can then sell to another 10 customers. Should you sell it to SMBs at the rate of volume and velocity? The question really is, what kind of company do you really want to build? Do you want to build a company that is doing, 50K of licenses every year, and do you want to get 50,000 of those, or are you going to be at 200,000 and you want, let's say, 10,000? That's an economic model discussion that only you as a founder know and have a good gut sense of. SMBs will give you feedback faster. Uh, Enterprises will give you feedback slower. There's no doubt about that. So it depends upon, like I said, the rate at which you can generate your IP. If you think you have enough gas in the tank that you have an opinion, you want to express it, you can do it, for an enterprise, have design partners refine it. If you need quicker, sooner, faster feedback, startups and SMBs are the right place to go, where you're trying to identify product market fit.
Got it. Few more questions, Rohit. Nizam asks, you know, in your experience of selling into enterprises in the US, can it be done by sitting from India, or is it absolutely necessary to have a physical presence in the US?
Yeah, so it's a mindset shift. I would highly recommend that, build a sales team. If not, the founders should ideally come to the market so that they're closer to the feedback, they hear what is going on, and they're not disconnected and misinterpreting what is going on inside the market. So I think it helps. You can definitely do it from India. There's no doubt. Lots and lots of companies have cracked the code while still being in India. The question is that, if US is the biggest or the most strategic market, then why would you not come in? So the answer is in the converse, that why not US and why only India if US is going to be the focus. If capital is a constraint, then I would recommend that, generating some more revenue both from the India and the APAC market, that would be ideal. APAC is also a very, very technology savvy and centric market. They buy technology. It's easier, relatively low cost to sell into those markets. You can perfect the product and then bring the product back to the US. And there was a second part of the question, Srini.
No, it was basically whether you should be, shifting to the US or you can continue to sell from India. That's the question.
Yeah. So the answer is the same. It's a mindset shift because, see, the other thing that also happens, right, is the enterprise sale is not like a one-time thing, or it's not a one-time interaction. You'll get the first meeting, the second meeting, which may be a group meeting, will probably be 15 days later. It may also be 20 days later. So what you want to do is to work on, a bunch of deals together, so that you get deals or, those meetings in frequency, you're able to define the POVs. FaceTime is very valuable. Post-COVID, that has reduced a lot. But even today, I would basically feel that there's a lot of merit in being in the same market as the customers.
Question is from Arjun. Arjun asks, how do you basically create a warm connect with the C-suite? Because cold emails or cold calls generally get pushed down the chain. So any experience on that? Because this becomes really important as you start selling into enterprise.
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. It's enterprise selling is a combination of a few things, right? It is a combination of outbound, inbound, events, marketing, thought leadership, and, analyst conversations. And it has to be done through a combination of all of these, right? The C-suite is not automatically going to warm up to the idea that you're bringing to them unless they are already aware of the space. If they are aware of the space, they'll actually go to Gartner. A very strong outbounding program really helps. That, initially all your leads are going to be outbound. About 2 years from where you start, 18 months to 24 months is where the ratio starts turning. And about 3 years, it is 50-50. Sometimes inbound exceeds outbound. So having a very strong SDR program running out of the US, I think that helps. I mean, by the way, sorry, let me take that word back. An strong SDR program targeting the US market. A lot of companies have done that, very successfully from India, including Oracle and Akamai. If you can find some of those initial people who set up those teams and ran those programs, you're just lucky. Just go for it, right? You can just set them up. In addition to all of this, thought leadership, education, it is invaluable. When you put all of these in front of, your C-suite, if you can start an ABM or a targeted ABM program with great content, I think you can just be top of mind for the execs who meeting.
Awesome. Aarti asks, do you start reaching out to clients by having sales team in the US, or is it possible to reach out from India itself? I think you've already answered that.
Yeah, it is possible. I think, the progress will be slightly stifled, but there are enough people who are interested in talking to software vendors across the world, although the bias is towards the US.
Suku Muramula asks, considering that you are a market leader, when do you decide you want to reinvent or change your strategy? considering that things are working for you almost all the time. So how difficult or easy it is, and when do you decide to do that in case you are a market leader and you still feel that the future probably doesn't bode well for you?
Yeah, so the best answer for this is what Naveen had told me several years ago, that every year you have to start on a new arc. I can give you an example. When we started our first product, it was called Pulse. And Pulse, we started in 2018. We had an exact definition of the market. We knew what was going to happen in that. And we also knew that the tailwinds for that market would start drying up by, let's say, 2025 or something. So in 2019, we started the investment on this whole data reliability segment, and that became huge, for us and for the industry in general. And we are already looking at the next arcs that, okay, where else are we going to spend our money and where else are we going to basically, start spending our money. So it depends. And Naveen would basically say that every arc that you invest in will teach you something. It may not make you successful, but that arc to complete will take 3 to 5 years. So we essentially take a 3 to 5 year horizon from an investment point of view. And, if it takes so much time, then it takes. And say hi to Zuki, by the way.
Naveen, by the way, for those who are unversed here, Naveen is the co-founder and CEO of InMovie. Awesome. I think we are already out of time, but there's this one segment that I obviously want to, kind of have with Rohit before we call it quits. That's called the rapid fire section. So Rohit, 5 questions would be fired at you, and you have less than 10 seconds to answer the questions. So can we get started?
Yeah, sure. Fire.
Okay. So one thing you would have done differently in the initial years of Excel data.
I wish it was just one thing. Everything is a mistake. So that is one thing, don't look back. It's fine. It's a natural process of evolution and growth. I'm not going to look back at everything. But the one thing, if you still press for me, I would have invested a lot in marketing soon enough. I think that was a mistake.
Got it. One thing you feel you and your team did exceedingly well while selling into global markets from Excel data.
We iterated very rapidly. So we would listen to feedback from customers even until today. If the customer says something, we come and logically debate that. If you think it is right, we go at it like the speed of light. There is just no holding back.
One simple advice to founders that are planning to sell into the US.
Build a good product. Build a product that everybody likes. In the US, like I said, everybody buys an iPhone, and iPhone is an example of a well put together product that solves like a critical problem. Phones were there, but there's nothing that sells as an iPhone. So build a good, compelling product.
Got it. One simple advice to folks who are planning to start up.
Think, why do you want to start up? Think deeply. It is backbreaking work. It'll be like, a very sinusoidal, expression of emotions within the same day, that too in rapid succession. So you will go through your own ups and downs. So that motivation or the fundamental reason why you should start up has to be very clear to yourself. If you're not clear why you're starting, don't even attempt it.
Podcast, movie, book, something you saw or read recently that you would recommend to all entrepreneurs listening in today.
Yeah, 2 books, Amazon Unbound, written by Brad Stone. Amazing book, just tells you, how something at that scale works. And another book that Girish recommended to me, and that has been like a game changer, from my own point of view as to how to do, exec management or how to think about employees. It's called First Break All the Rules. These 2 books I would highly recommend. And the second one, the credit goes to Girish, because he referred to it in one of the interviews that he was doing at the Montgomery Summit. And I just ordered the book while I was sitting over there, and it's an amazing read.
Got it. Couple of follow-up questions actually, because I think this will really help founders listening in. One answer you gave was you would have probably looking back invested more in marketing. Any idea why you think that's important for startups and important for them to prioritize that in the initial years?
See, when as you go along in your journey, right, as you're sort of continuing to expand on your GTM, what you'll find out is that the number of opportunities that you can participate in is severely limited by the number of campaigns that you can enter or the number of opportunities that are generated at the top of the funnel. And the sooner that you have a website, a digital presence, or something working for you, it is easier. The second thing also along with it is that, like I mentioned earlier, that you can build the best product, but nobody will buy. So I think building, educating, and simplifying is the founding team's responsibility. It is not anybody else's responsibility, and therefore it has to be started soon. Marketing is not just about spending the dollars. It's about thinking about how do you position the product. I feel that the difference between a company that goes IPO and doesn't go IPO is just positioning.
Got it. The other answer you gave was, the fact that you would debate customer feedback, and if you felt that that was relevant, you would just go at breakneck speed and get it implemented, right? How do you decide whether a particular feedback is relevant or not, right? Because there are so many factors that are involved. It's a big client, we might lose them. It's a great logo to have. Let's just get this done. But maybe that doesn't bode well for the medium or the long term growth of the organization, or it is in violation of the product roadmap you already have. So how do you decide, right? Because there's so many factors that are at play.
So that sense, I think the team is in the best position to take it, right? And over a period of time, it goes away from the founding team, it goes into the senior engineering team. The principal engineers are in the best position to take that call. The product managers take those calls. The sales teams, they actually tell you whether they're hearing the same feedback from 5 customers or 1 customer. Is it a 1-off? Is it a 5-off? And those are very tactical, touchy-feely calls that people have to take. But at a broad level, right, from a strategic point of view, for example, if you're building performance dashboards for, let's say, a query engine called Snowflake, then building a performance dashboard for Databricks makes sense. Why? Because this is a large market which has over $1 billion. That is also a large market with $1 billion in revenue. And so therefore, these 2 markets will cumulatively make sense. And therefore, it should be on the roadmap. Where it gets debated a lot is that, when you don't have enough evidence of the market, and that is where, your own intuition and insight about how deeply have you thought about the space will determine whether this is making sense or not. Because in some cases, for example, there were requests to us to build even crawlers that, can you crawl because you already have a connector architecture? And the answer was very simple. Yes, we can do it, but, will we do it? And what is value if we did it? And will there be like 10 customers coming and buying it? So those answers are sort of very easy to give.
Makes sense. I think we are already 12 minutes past time, and it's getting late here in the US. So I'll stop all the questions now. I have been greedy enough for myself as well as for everyone listening in to, pack as many questions as possible and make this as relevant and as useful to all the listeners. So thank you very much, Rohit, for actually taking time out and for actually, staying back and patiently answering all the questions and sharing all your insights, which are obviously, very incisive and very, very helpful. We'll come back with more episodes. Stay tuned. But I have really enjoyed this. So thanks again, Rohit, and Godspeed.
Yeah, of course. And good luck to you as well, Srini. And thanks everyone whoever tuned in today. Hopefully this was not a waste of time.
Awesome. See
All
you
right.
guys. Bye.
Bye. Good night. And